Ethical futurism at its core is really about building a better, brighter world. A world that will feel proud to leave to future generations.
Well, the UN defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's really about the ethical choices that we make today for future generations. You see, what we've done so far on this lovely blue planet that we live on is all the things that we've done to get us where we are now. We need to do things differently to make the change that's needed to avoid a climate catastrophe.
Yeah, what got us here isn't going to get us to the next place.
That's what I was trying to say.
Exactly. And then the other thing I was thinking, what we often speak about is from different perspectives. So sustainability, as speakers, we can talk about the perspective of changes in things like ESG regulations, disclosure regulations that are affecting lots of publicly traded companies, for example. But there's another thing that Alison and I come at this topic of sustainability, which is maybe not the first one you would think of, which is really about the war for talent. We've heard about this phrase, quiet quitting, or in China we call it lying flat. Well, actually, there's a new thing called climate quitting.
It's climate quitting. It just means that millennials and Gen Zs, they want to go and work for companies whose values align with their own, but they're very sharp and focused on the climate, on climate change and what they can do. Lots of millennials and Gen Zs, in fact, lots of people feel kind of helpless and helpless and say, what can we do as individuals? But there are things that we can do as individuals, as companies, as countries, and as governments to make those changes that we are so desperately and urgently needed to turn this big climate catastrophe around. We as humans on the planet, we take for granted everything that the planet has offered us over the centuries, and we've exploited what's been available to us. But now the party's kind of not quite over yet, but we need to sort of really sharpen down on what needs to change, what we need to do. Everything that we take for granted on the planet, ecosystems, earth systems, animal life, plant life, unless we really get a handle on how we do things differently for the future, well, there may not be a future. People don't think about us being on the planet, us humans. The world spins at around 1,000 miles per hour, and we're oblivious to even that fact. But what we can do now is, and how we encourage change through our keynotes and through presenting to companies and industries, is that we invite companies and industries to make better choices, to ask better questions, to take their ethical filter and put their decisions through the ethical filter so that they know that what they're doing is the right thing. I think it was a lawyer, was it William L. Taylor, once said that there's no right way to do a wrong thing. So with that in mind, we can ask better questions and do things differently for a better future, for future generations.
And I think bringing in the ethical futurists as your co-keynote speakers, we can hopefully be that catalyst of conversations. About what it means to create a better, brighter, more sustainable world. I think the very first co-keynote we ever did as the Ethical Futurist was for a global engineering company. And it's interesting because Alison's background is as an engineer and as a lawyer. So her brain works very differently from mine. And it was at this beautiful lake in Switzerland. And what a lot of clients really like is that when they bring us into co-keynote, we come at things from slightly different perspectives, especially around sustainability. I come at it more from in terms of how technology, things like artificial intelligence, can help us towards this. Alison comes a bit more from kind of Earth systems, a slightly different perspective on it. And I think that client really appreciated that one.
That was an interesting keynote because you were coming at it from the technologies of today, but I actually stripped it right back because they're a company that produces fertilizers, and they're looking to produce green fertilizers and
green ammonia.
Yeah, exactly. And but the same principles in that industry go right back to fermentation. So I was able to bring in stories of simple things like baking bread. What was the same fermentation process that they use, and it's the same principles. So all the answers are there. The answers are there in nature, and we just need to look back. We can look to the future as well. Obviously, I don't want to write you out of the keynote, James. I don't want you to say, right, sharp elbows, it's all about me. But some of the answers are already there within nature, and we just need to look and find them.
Yeah. So that was a lovely event. That was a kind of smaller 300-person internal event for all their employees. The next one I think we did straight after that was for 4,500 people. This was for the World Credit Union Conference in Vancouver, the Vancouver Convention Center. So big event. And you had a lot of people there that weren't too experienced around topics like sustainability, for example. So what we were also having to do is add a little bit of education to what we were doing and make them feel empowered by the things that they could do in their case, credit unions, to help us get towards this more ethical future. And then the one I think we did straight after that was for Deloitte's ESG Summit. So a very technical audience. This is chief audit executives, chief financial officers. And that was really about all the new disclosure regulations that are coming in both the US and EU and other parts of the world to basically get rid of things like greenwashing, for example, to focus on how do we achieve these sustainability goals? How do we achieve our ESG goals? And so that was really fun because Alison and I, as we mentioned earlier, we come from very different perspectives on things. Alison is this legal, really focused engineering mind, and I'm not. So I think the audience appreciated that kind of different energy that you get on stage. You will only ever get that with a co-keynote. You will never get that with a single keynote speaker on stage on their own. So I think the audience really appreciated having these two different presenters on stage at the same time, presenting on this topic from slightly different perspectives, but then really coming together around a kind of harmonious message at the end.
We divide up certain topics, but we take the topics and we look at them from two completely different perspectives. So if there was a topic, the topic of the circular economy, I'm looking at it more in relation to how can we make things more sustainable, but not just sustainable. There's a different way of looking at it is to make things much more regenerative, whereas James will look at other things from a more of an AI technological perspective.
Yeah. But it's interesting because fundamentally we're storytellers.
Yeah.
On stage, we're going there, we're coming on stage together, and we're kind of almost tag teaming it between the different stories that we're telling. Alison will tend to focus a little bit more on some of the data that supports the things that we're saying. I may be using more kind of traditional narrative storytelling on stage. So we're kind of on stage at the same time throughout the whole presentation. We're kind of covering slightly different areas depending on the topic that we're covering as well. And also it's really acting as a bit like a conversation on stage as well. We're having this conversation because I think in many businesses, that's what's going on. There's conversations that are going on about, well, these are our sustainability goals. What does that mean for us? The chief sustainability officer may have these big goals, but the chief audit officer, the chief financial officer has to figure out how you measure and deliver on those as well. So these are different ways of looking at things. And I think when you come together, with Alison and I come together on stage, that's kind of what we want to do. It's kind of conversation on stage, inspiring, enlightening, sometimes quite funny. Alison's much funnier than I am on stage as well. So I think audiences really appreciate that.